Hello and welcome to this lecture on the packing and unpacking the variables. We can observe that most of the times entering the value to the function is bit restricting. So we'll know some trick now in order to make our function more flexible than before. And it is the most used while you code games too. And that is packing and unpacking arguments. So we'll see packing and unpacking arguments, keyword arguments. So let's get into it. Firstly, what I'm gonna do is let me run the module and show you what is basically the unpacking the argument. So let's call this print function here, and if you just call this print function with, let me say, 1 2 3 4 5, and you can see it is basically an unpacking here. So what is this unpacking really? So is unpacking is basically you are calling this print function with one at a time. That means 1 is passed at first, 2 is passed at second, 3 is passed at third. So this is basically you are passing one by one. Basically it is just iterable type. That means 1 is passed as in arguments each time. But what if I just call this numbers, and let me see number, and what if I have 1 2 3 4 5 here, and now what you call here is with this print function, let's call this number, and you could see only the list here. So here what is happened is in this number the list is packed and this has been passed as an argument to this print function. So what if we want to do, that is basically unpacking this list. So in order to unpack the list or any iterable data type, what you can do is just call this print function and you just pass here one asterisk. So one asterisk is basically for our arguments and two asterisk is for our keyword arguments. So one asterisk is for the normal arguments, and here number is basically a normal arguments, and two asterisk is for our keyword arguments. That means for the dictionary. So here the number is just a list, it is not a dictionary. So we'll just stick here or one star and just pass here number. So when you pass this number with an star, you are going to see 1 2 3 4 5 like we have here. So in this iterable data type, that is list, what is happened is it will just pass one at a time. That is, it will pass one to this print and print one will be passed. It is same as saying like print me, that is first one. Basically it is saying just pass a tuple here, that means 1 2 3 4 5. So if you see here, this is the tuple. So what this asterisk number has created as a tuple. That means this asterisk number will create as a tuple which can be iterable, and we have just this number as an unpacked number from the list. So this basically a unpacking. So what is happening here is that we take each item, that is each item has been taken and it becomes its own argument to the function. So this is unpacking, and it also works perfectly with the string, because string is also iterable type. So let me say here print me asterisk and abc. If you see this, then you could see that is abc has been unpacked. So this is basically unpacking, that is basically taking each argument or basically taking each item of this iterable data type as an argument to the function. So next will be our important, that is packing the arguments. So let's make this script for this. So when you just call this add function that we just created in the previous lectures, you could see we just pass here x and y, and you just return this basically x and y here, that is addition of x and y, and while calling you just print that is add me, that is 4 and 5. Let me say add me this, and you could just save it and run it, and you could see 9 here. So this is basically a quite restricting, because what if we want multiples numbers? Say let me see, I want these numbers to be just added and print me down. So if you save and run it, it could show you something that is add has only the 2 positional argument but 6 were given. So this positional arguments means this 4 has to be in this position of x, 5 has to be in the position of y. So they are the positional arguments, but the 5 are given here. It only requires 2, and if you only passed here 2, it is going to work fine. But if you pass more than 2 or less than 2, it will say that the numbers of positional argument is less or greater than what it expected. So how this can be resolved is basically using the packing arguments. So let me pack it. So what is packing basically? So let me put a asterisk. So I have already said you, in order to pack we have to use this asterisk, and let me say num. So this num will take any number of values. So this num will be iterable data type now. That means it is now can be looped. So this number can be looped now because it has created us a tuple. So in this tuple we'll just loop, that is, let me first put here total equal to O, which will be basically the sum of this total of the numbers. So let me just loop in this number, that is for, let me say, num. In this num, that is tuple, you are just looping with this num variable. So what you're gonna do here, so it just add each of these element to this total, that is with this num, just add it. And when you just now call this num, you can just pass here any number of variable or positional arguments. So let me just save it and run it, and you could see, because we haven't returned it. Okay, so this is time to return, that is just return me a total, and you could save and run it again, and you could see that is 30, which is basically true, which is the addition of all these number. So what if I want to add multiple number again, so this number, so if you save it and run it again, it should work. You find that is giving you a value that you expected, because instead of just having this positional argument that is only the 2 value, we have just created a tuple here. So this will be created as a tuple in this num, and you are just looping in this num, and you are just returning the total. So this is really important to know. Instead of just passing the few arguments, you are just now packing it into the tuple, and you are just looping, because tuple are iterable type. That means you can just loop it through and get your expected results. So this is basically the important of packing the arguments. On the other hand, what is this keyword arguments? So keyword arguments are something that we have in the pairs, that are keys and values. So while calling this, let me say define add, and while calling this x and y, and let me say it is returning me x plus y. And while you call this add, when you just pass here x is 10 and let me say y is 8, you are just referring this keys and value. That means x is this, x should be 10, that is key equal to value, key equal to value. So this is basically keyword arguments. So let's see how can we just pack and unpack these keyword arguments. And to do this, let me just define the function and analyze our packing and unpacking. So first, let's see how can we just unpack it. That means we'll just create a function that is about function, and it will take a name, our age as in parameter, and the next will be likes. And let's create the variable here, info variable, that is the basically our sentence to print. And I'll say I am this name, and let me say I am year old, and I like this. So let's format it with these arguments, that is age and last is likes. So this is basically our about function. So let's just return this info from here, and let's call this about now. So how can we call? So one can be just passing here name as something that is, you can say let me say John, and you can just pass here now age, and you can just pass it the 34, and anything you can just pass here. But it is really restricting, because what you can do instead of this is you can also have something that is the old traditional convention to call, that is just passing your John and 34, and the like should be Python. So it would work fine if you just save it and run it. It works fine. Okay, we're just not printing it. If you are working with the cell, it is okay, but while working with this script, you should print each and every statement. So let me see here. You can see I'm John and I'm just 34-year old and I like Python. It works fine, but what if I just put here as a Python first, and let me say Python and 34, and just save it and run it, and you could see something result like this, which is very much what you didn't want. That is, I'm John, I'm Python years old and I like 34. So this is because this John has been a positional argument to this name, and Python to age, and 34 to likes. So this basically order. So here was the order, and we just assign this to the variable or to these arguments or parameter in order. So what if it's just pass here as a name, and here is let me say this is like, and here was age. So if you could do this, then you could just get the result what you expected. So this was basically our keyword argument. So what you can do here now is just packing these keyword arguments. So let me say, instead of just passing these manually, I'll just make one dictionary. That is, make this dictionary, and this dictionary, you know how to create this. It should be in curly braces, and give here that is your key and value. Let me say the name. So name would be John, and your basically age, age should be, let me say the age of the John is something 34, and likes now. So likes will be Python. So if you just run this, or if you just first we have to pack here. So packing this is basically dictionary. So dictionary is always the keyword argument. That means you have a key and value pair. So in order to pack or unpack this keyword argument, you make use of this double asterisk. So just remember that single asterisk is for the simple argument and double asterisk is for the keyword argument. So let's pass here a dictionary, and let's save it and run it, and you could see something that is what you wanted. This is basically, I'm John, I'm 34-year old and I like Python. So what is happening here is basically you are passing a dictionary, and it is same like calling that is with this name. Here name is basically there John, and similarly the age is 34. So same was before what we called. So it's basically the same way calling that was previously. So this is basically and what you call unpacking here. So here you can just unpacked, and that is you just have here John as a name, and age is 34, and likes is Python. So you just have here unpacked. So basically what is important now is packing the keyword argument. So it is really important, and let's call the function that is about function to represent that. So let me say about function, and to call this we just pass something that is double here, that is double asterisk, because this is our keyword arguments, and I'll say kwargs. So kwargs is basically a convention that is popular to use in the case of a keyword arguments. Kwargs is for the keyword arguments and args for the argument. So this kwargs is basically your dictionary. So what are you going to do in this dictionary? First we have to convert this dictionary into the tuples. So I'll say for key in value, because we have this key and value in the dictionary. So I'll say for key in value in this kwargs. So kwargs is basically dictionary, and dictionary cannot be iterable. So in order to convert it to the iterable, you have to make it tuple. So while calling this function, that is items function, when you call this item functions in this dictionary, you have now tuple. So in the tuple you can just loop and get this value key and value pair. So let me just print it now. So let's format it, and I'll say just format it for me. And now what you're going to check is just format, just call this format, and it should have key and value. And this is our print statement. So now call this about here. So while the calling this about, what you're gonna have is, I'll say the key should be Python and the value should be easy, and just give a Java as in key, and let me say hard is our value. So let's see how this output comes. Basically let's save it and run it, and you could see something that is Python easy, Java hard. So this is basically packing the arguments, that is in this case keyword arguments. While calling from these arguments, that is basically keyword argument, what we have is we have just packed into these kwargs. This all the value has been packed into these kwargs, and this kwargs is basically a dictionary, because this is basically a dictionary, and this kwargs is now packed as in dictionary. And in this dictionary we have just converted with this items function in order to get the tuple, and we can just loop in this tuple, and we have just formatted here, that is key is Python, value is easy. In the next loop, that is basically this, for this part, the basically what we have, key is Java and hard is basically value. So this is it for the packing and unpacking. Hope you get all of this, because this part is really important in order to work with the game. So see you in the next.